I didn't realize that buying my first home would cost me my family until I looked down at my phone and saw 79 missed calls. I had spent a decade scraping together a down payment on a $350,000 bungalow, believing I was finally securing my freedom. Instead, I had unwittingly provided the perfect venue for my parents' secret plan, moving my sister's family into my spare bedroom without ever actually asking me first. The pen felt heavy in my hand, heavier than a simple plastic stick had any right to feel. I stared down at the final signature line on the document. The paper crisp and bright white under the fluorescent lights of the title company office. This was it, the culmination of a decade of missed happy hours, packed lunches, and driving a Honda Civic with a rattling muffler long past its expiration date. "Congratulations, Haley," the title agent said, sliding a heavy set of keys across the mahogany table. "You are officially a homeowner." I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 22. I touched the cold metal of the keys. $350,000. That was the number on the paperwork. It was a staggering sum, a number that made my stomach flip with a cocktail of nausea and exhilaration. To anyone else in Brookridge, a mid-sized city where the cost of living was slowly creeping up, a $350,000 bungalow was a starter home. It was modest, it was sensible, but to me, it was a palace. It was mine. I walked out to my car, the afternoon sun hitting the pavement hard. I sat in the driver's seat for a long moment, just gripping the steering wheel. I thought about the years I spent working double shifts, one as a junior project manager and the other bartending on weekends, just to chip away at my student loans. I thought about the way my parents, Martin and Colleen, would nod vaguely when I mentioned my savings goals, only to pivot the conversation to my younger sister. Lauren needed help with her rent. Lauren needed a new car seat. Lauren and Chase were a little short for the electric bill this month. I loved my sister. I loved my niece and nephew. But as I turned the ignition and backed out of the parking spot, a dark, quiet thought whispered in the back of my mind. I had done this alone. I had built this safety net, this equity, this future, with zero help from the people who were supposed to be my safety net. And now that I had it, I felt a fierce, territorial need to protect it. The house was a charming, yellow-sided bungalow on a street lined with mature oak trees. It had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a porch that begged for a rocking chair. When I pulled into the driveway, I didn't see a structure of wood and drywall. I saw a trophy. I spent the afternoon cleaning. Even though the place was already empty, I wiped down baseboards that were already white. I opened windows to let the breeze blow through rooms that were mine to fill. I stood in the center of the living room, listening to the silence. It was a luxurious, expensive silence. By 6 p.m, the silence was broken. My parents' sedan pulled up to the curb, followed closely by Chase's battered truck. My stomach tightened instinctively. I had invited them for a small, impromptu housewarming dinner, just pizza and salad on paper plates. Since I hadn't unpacked my dishes yet, it was the right thing to do. They were my family. Mom came in first, carrying a potted fern that looked like it had seen better days. "Oh, Haley," she said, stepping into the entryway. "It is smaller than I thought from the pictures. It is 1,200 square feet. Mom," I said, taking the plant, "it is perfect for me." Dad followed, looking around with a critical squint. He tapped a knuckle against the doorframe. "Solid bones," he muttered. "Roof looked a little old. Though, you get that inspected?" "Yes, Dad. It is certified for another 10 years. Then came the chaos. Lauren, Chase, 5-year-old Toby, and 3-year-old Mia tumbled through the door. The energy in the room shifted instantly from serene to frantic. Toby immediately began running circles around the empty living room, his sneakers squeaking on the hardwood floors I had just polished. "Congrats, Hales," Lauren said, giving me a side hug. She looked tired. She always looked tired, wearing yoga pants and a stained sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun that wasn't a fashion statement but a necessity. "Must be nice to have all this space to yourself." "Thanks," I said, trying to ignore the edge in her voice. We ordered pizza, and I laid everything out on the kitchen island. For the first 20 minutes, things were okay. We ate, we talked about the neighborhood, and I showed them the freshly painted cabinets. But as the meal wound down, the commentary started to drift into territory that made the hair on the back of my arms stand up. Mom walked over to the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. She stood there for a long time, staring out at the flat, grassy yard enclosed by a new privacy fence. "You know," she said, her voice bright and loud enough for everyone to hear. "This place has such a perfect backyard for kids. I mean, look at that grass. Toby and Mia would have a field day out there." I took a sip of my sparkling water. "It is a great yard. I am planning to put in a vegetable garden in the spring." Lauren looked up from her slice of pepperoni. "A garden? That sounds like a lot of work. You are never home anyway with your job." "I am home more now," I said. "That is the point of buying the place." Chase, my brother-in-law, was leaning against the counter, scrolling through something on his phone. He looked up, his eyes scanning the ceiling, then the appliances. "So, what did you end up getting this place for? Interest rate-wise?" I told him the percentage. It was low, locked in just before the market hiked. He let out a low whistle. "Must be nice. Our rent just went up another $100 a month, basically paying your mortgage for a shoebox." I didn't know what to say to that, so I didn't say anything. I just cleared the paper plates. Martin, my dad, cleared his throat. He had that look on his face, the one he got when he was trying to sound casual but was actually winding up for a pitch. "So, Haley, checking the paperwork and everything? How many people are actually allowed on the deed? Or the lease? I know you own it, but are there city ordinances on occupancy?" I paused, a half-crushed soda can in my hand. "It is a single-family home." "Dad." "Why?" "Oh, nothing," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Just curious. You know, in case you ever want to help your sister out for a while, if they needed a landing pad." The room went quiet. Even Toby stopped running for a second. I forced a laugh, trying to keep the mood light. I think 4 people in a 2-bedroom house might be a tight squeeze. "Dad. Plus, I just got here." Mom chimed in immediately. "Oh, family makes it work. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment when you were a baby. Haley, you survive." I turned away to tie up the trash bag, hiding the grimace on my face. It wasn't the suggestion that bothered me. It was the immediacy of it. I hadn't even slept one night in the house, and they were already mentally measuring the square footage for Lauren's needs. After dinner, I gave them the full tour. When we got to the 2nd bedroom, which was currently empty save for a few boxes of books, Lauren walked in like she was inspecting a hotel room she had already paid for. She opened the closet door. She tested the glide of the windows. She stood in the center of the room and spun around slowly. "Wow," she said softly. "This gets great light." "It does," I said, leaning in the doorway. "It is going to make a great office." Lauren didn't seem to hear me. She turned to Chase, who was hovering in the hallway. "This would make an amazing kids' room. Chase, you could fit the bunk beds right on that wall. And the toy chest under the window." Chase nodded, looking at the floorboards. "Yeah, it is bigger than their room now." I felt a spike of panic in my chest. I took a step into the room, reclaiming the space. "Well, it is going to be my office and a guest room, for when you guys visit, but mostly an office. I need a dedicated workspace." Lauren looked at me, her expression blank, almost pitying. "You need a whole room just for a desk?" "I work from home 2 days a week." "Lauren?" "Yes." She shrugged and walked out, brushing past me. Must be a luxury. By the time they left an hour later, I was exhausted. I locked the front door and leaned my forehead against the cool wood. I felt guilty. That was the worst part. I felt guilty for having a house when they were struggling. I felt guilty for having a spare room, but beneath the guilt, there was anger. Why couldn't they just be happy for me? Why did my success immediately have to become a resource for the family? I grabbed my phone and walked to the back porch. Sitting on the steps in the dark, I FaceTimed Dana. Dana answered on the second ring, her face covered in a green clay mask. "Hello, Homeowner, show me the palace. I turned the camera around and gave her a shaky tour of the dark backyard. It is great. Dana. It really is. But? She prompted. I turned the camera back to my face. My family just left. Dana groaned. Let me guess. Lauren made a comment about how expensive her rent is? Worse. I said, Dad asked about occupancy limits. Lauren started measuring the spare room for bunk beds. Not literally, but practically. She walked around like she was already moving in. Haley, Dana said, her voice dropping the joking tone. You have to nip that in the bud. Immediately. I know, I said, picking at a splinter on the deck. But I feel bad. Chase made a comment about my mortgage being lower than their rent. And it is true. I have all this space and they are crammed into that duplex. Stop, Dana ordered. You worked 2 jobs. You drove a beater car for 6 years. You ate ramen while Lauren was leasing new SUVs and going on vacations she couldn't afford. Do not let them monetize your guilt. I sighed, looking up at the moon. It just felt predatory, like they were casing the joint. They were, Dana said. Keep your boundaries up. Do not give them a key. Seriously. Haley, do not give them a key. I promised her I wouldn't. But as I hung up and went to bed that night, the unease lingered. I slept in my new bedroom, in my new bed, but I didn't sleep well. I dreamed of people walking through my house, opening drawers, and sleeping on my floor. And when I tried to scream at them to leave, no sound came out. The next few weeks were a lesson in passive aggression. I was busy unpacking and settling into my routine. I loved the house. I loved the way the morning light hit the kitchen tiles. I loved having my coffee on the porch, but every interaction with my parents felt like a deposition. Mom called me on a Tuesday. Hey, honey, she said, just checking in. How is the house? It is great. Mom, finally got the internet set up properly. That is good, she said. Listen, I was talking to your Aunt Claire, and she mentioned that some HOAs are really strict about guests. Does yours have rules about that? Like, how long family can stay? I frowned, putting down the book I was reading. Mom, I don't have a strict HOA. It is a voluntary neighborhood association. Why do you keep asking about this? Oh, just protective, she said quickly. You hear horror stories about people getting fined for having extended guests. Just looking out for you. And then, a few days later, Dad, we were at a hardware store, picking up some mulch. He was looking at door locks. You know, he said, examining a deadbolt. You really ought to have a keypad entry. Easier for people to get in if you are not home. I am the only one living there. Dad, I have a key. Well, sure, he said, but what if there is an emergency? Or what if, well, do you really need both bedrooms set up right now? I stopped the cart. Dad, what are you asking? Nothing, he said, putting the lock back. Just thinking about efficiency. Heating an empty room costs money. Haley, just practical advice. I kept deflecting. I kept telling them the spare room was full of boxes. I told them I was painting it. I told them I had a friend coming to stay for a week. I built a wall of small, polite excuses because I wasn't brave enough yet to say the big, hard no. Then came the letter. It was a Tuesday afternoon, about a month after I moved in. I collected the mail from the box at the end of the driveway. Most of it was junk. Coupons for window replacement, flyers for pizza. But sandwiched between a credit card offer and a utility bill was a white envelope. It looked official. The return address was the Brook Ridge School District. The addressee was Lauren Miller. I stopped on the sidewalk, staring at it. Lauren didn't live here. She lived 20 minutes away, in a completely different school zone. Her apartment was zoned for a school that, admittedly, wasn't as highly rated as the one in my neighborhood, but that didn't explain why her mail was in my box. I walked inside and tossed the rest of the mail on the counter, keeping the envelope in my hand. I pulled out my phone and texted Lauren. Hey, got a piece of mail for you today. From the school district. Did you accidentally put my address on something? I waited. The 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a text came through. Oh, yeah. LOL. I just used your address for a school district form. No big deal. Just wanted to see if they sent the packet. Thanks. I stared at the screen. No big deal? I typed back. Lauren, you can't use my address for school stuff. That's for residency. I don't want to get in trouble. Her reply was instant and dismissive. Chill. Hales, it is just a form. Nobody is checking. Just keep it for me and I will pick it up this weekend. I set the phone down. My heart rate picking up. It wasn't just a form. You don't get mail from the district unless you are registering or inquiring as a resident. She had used my address, my new address, without asking. My uneasiness, which had been a low hum, began to vibrate at a higher frequency. If she had used my address for the school, what else had she used it for? I sat down at my computer. I needed to see what was actually attached to this house. I was the owner. I paid the mortgage. I navigated to the city's property records portal. It was public information, mostly tax assessments, deed history. I wanted to make sure everything was listed correctly under my name, Haley Price. I logged in and pulled up my parcel number. Owner, Haley Price. Purchase date, October 15th. Assessed value, $350,000. Everything looked fine. I scrolled down to the contact information section, the part used for tax bills and official notices. Primary contact, Haley Price. Email, haley.price@gmail.com. I breathed a sigh of relief. I was being paranoid. Dana had gotten into my head, but then my eyes caught the line below it. Secondary contact, Martin Colleen Price. Email, mcprice@familymail.com. I froze. Why were they on there? I thought back to the closing day. The stack of paperwork was inches thick. I had signed page after page, my hand cramping. Dad had been there with me at the lawyer's office, sitting in the corner, reading a magazine, occasionally looking over my shoulder. Here, let me check that one for typos, he had said a few times, taking pages from the stack while the agent was printing more. Had he slipped something in? Or had I simply written their email down on some emergency contact form that automatically populated into the county database? It didn't technically give them ownership. A secondary contact was just for notifications, but it felt invasive. It felt like a tag on a wildlife ear. They wanted to know if I missed a tax payment. They wanted to know if the city cited me for tall grass. They wanted to stay in the loop. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking slightly. I was overreacting. I had to be. Parents co-sign things all the time. They were just being helpful, in their own overbearing way. I decided to drive over to their house. I needed to return Lauren's letter anyway. And I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to see if they looked guilty. It was dusk when I drove past their house. It was a modest ranch. The house I grew up in. The lights were on in the living room. I slowed my car as I approached. The weather was mild, and they were sitting on the front porch. Lauren was there, too. They were huddled around a small patio table. The glow of a laptop screen illuminated their faces. Lauren was typing something, her face intent, focused. Mom was pointing at the screen, saying something, gesturing with a glass of wine. I rolled my window down, intending to shout a hello, to pull into the driveway. "Hey," I called out, waving my hand out the window. The reaction was immediate and bizarre. Lauren's head snapped up. She saw my car. In one fluid, panicked motion, she slammed the laptop shut. The snap was audible even from the street. Mom jumped, almost spilling her wine. She pasted a wide, unnatural smile on her face and waved frantically. "Haley, hi." Lauren didn't wave. She just sat there, her hand pressing down on the closed lid of the laptop, looking like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar. I didn't stop. I kept driving, my foot pressing down on the gas pedal a little harder than necessary. I watched them in my rearview mirror until I turned the corner. They weren't just browsing Facebook. You don't slam a laptop shut because you are looking at Pinterest recipes. They were hiding something. And given the letter on my passenger seat and the email address on my property deed, I had a sick, sinking feeling that whatever they were looking at, it had my name on it. I drove home in silence. the envelope from the school district sitting next to me like a ticking bomb. I didn't go inside immediately. I sat in my driveway, looking at my dark house, the house I had worked so hard for. It felt different now. It didn't feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a target. I walked inside and locked the door behind me. I threw the deadbolt, then I checked the back door. Locked. I went into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, my mind racing. Just a school form, Lauren had said. Just curious about occupancy. Dad had said. I picked up the envelope again. I held it up to the light. I couldn't read through the security tint, but I could feel the thickness of the papers inside. It wasn't a single sheet. It was a packet. I left the letter on the counter and walked into the spare bedroom, the room Lauren had already mentally decorated with bunk beds. I stood in the dark, looking at the streetlights casting long shadows on the empty floor. They were planning something. I didn't know the details yet, and I didn't know the timeline. But as I stood there in the silence of my $350,000 home, I realized that the hardest part of homeownership wasn't going to be the mortgage or the maintenance. It was going to be keeping my family out. I took a deep breath, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the settling of the house. I pulled my phone out and opened my contact list. I scrolled down to Dana's name, thumb hovering, then I scrolled past it. I went to the browser and typed in a search query I never thought I would need. Rights of guests versus tenants in Brookridge. I hit search. I needed to know where the line was, because I had a terrible feeling my parents were about to try and cross it. Sunday dinner at my parents' house had always been a performance, but that week, the script had clearly been rewritten without my knowledge. The smell of pot roast and overboiled carrots hung heavy in the air, a scent that usually triggered nostalgia, but today made my stomach turn. I sat at my usual spot, the wobbly chair near the china cabinet, while Lauren fed 3-year-old Mia mashed potatoes across from me. Chase was staring at the football game playing silently on the television in the corner, and my parents were exchanging looks that I could only describe as conspiratorial. The air felt thick, charged with static electricity. I picked at my roast beef, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety that had been tightening in my chest since I saw Lauren slam that laptop shut a few days ago. So, Martin said, wiping his mouth with a paper napkin. He didn't look at me. He looked at the salt shaker. We got some news about Lauren's place this week. I froze, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. Oh? Yeah. Chase grunted, eyes still on the screen. Landlord is selling. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew where this was going. I knew it with the certainty of gravity. He gave us 60 days, Lauren added, her voice trembling just enough to be sympathetic, but not enough to seem weak. He wants to cash out while the market is high. It is a nightmare. There is nothing out there in our price range, nothing safe. Anyway, Colleen, my mother, immediately jumped in. Her cue picked up flawlessly. It is terrible. You read the news. The apartments they can afford are in neighborhoods where you wouldn't want to walk to your car at night, let alone raise 2 babies. She turned to me then, her eyes wide and pleading. That is why we were thinking. Haley, it is just so fortunate that you have the bungalow now. It is secure. It has that alarm system you installed. It is so much safer than any apartment they could scrape together right now. The trap snapped shut. I put my fork down. The ceramic clink sounded like a gunshot in the quiet dining room. What are you saying? Mom? I asked, keeping my voice level. Martin leaned forward, clasping his hands on the table. We are just saying, it seems like a natural solution, just for a bit, until they get back on their feet. You have the space. They have the need. It is family helping family. I looked around the table. Lauren was watching me, her eyes narrow and assessing. Chase was finally looking away from the TV, waiting. My parents wore identical expressions of expectant pressure. I took a deep breath. I had rehearsed this in the shower. I had rehearsed this on my drive over. I looked directly at Lauren. I am really sorry about the duplex. I said, that sounds incredibly stressful. I paused. But I cannot have you guys move in with me. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of the room. I continued. trying to soften the blow before they could interrupt. I know moving is expensive. I have some savings left over from the closing costs. I would be happy to give you $2,000 to help with a deposit on a new place. I can help you look. I can help you pack. But I cannot be your landlord. Colleen looked as if I had just slapped her across the face. Money? She asked, her voice shrill. You think this is about money? This is about family. Haley, your sister is about to be on the street. She is not on the street. Mom, I said, my voice rising slightly. She has 60 days. That is 2 months to find a rental. And go where? Lauren snapped. She dropped the spoon she was using to feed Mia. Into a shoebox? Into a place with mold? You have a $350,000 house with an empty bedroom just sitting there, gathering dust, and you are offering me check like I am a charity case? I am offering to help you. Lauren, but I need my own space. I just bought it. I haven't even unpacked all my boxes yet. You don't understand, Colleen said, shaking her head aggressively. You don't understand what it is like to have kids. You don't understand the fear of not knowing where they are going to sleep. It must be nice to only have to worry about yourself. It wasn't nice. It was lonely and exhausting and hard. But I didn't say that. I stayed firm. I'm not saying I don't care. I said, I am saying that living together would be a disaster. We have different lifestyles. The house is small. It is 1,200 square feet. It is not a mansion. Lauren laughed. A harsh, bitter sound. It is a mansion compared to what we are looking at. You are hoarding space. Haley, that is what you are doing. You are hoarding space because you want to play successful career woman in your little castle while we drown. Chase chimed in then, his voice low. We helped you. Hales, remember? I looked at him. When? When your transmission blew in 2015, Martin interrupted, pointing a finger at me. Who paid for that? Who wrote the check to the mechanic? You did, Dad, I said. It was $1,200, and I paid you back over 6 months. That is not the point. Martin slammed his hand on the table, making the silverware jump. The point is that we stepped up. We didn't ask questions. We didn't tell you to go find a cheaper mechanic. We helped. And now, when the shoe is on the other foot, you are drawing lines in the sand. I felt the tears pricking at my eyes. Tears of frustration, not sadness. It was a false equivalency. And they knew it. Fixing a car was not the same as housing a family of 4 indefinitely. It is not the same. Dad, I said, standing up, I am not doing this. I am not having this conversation. Sit down, Colleen ordered. We are not finished. I am finished, I said. I grabbed my purse. The offer stands. Lauren, I will help you with a deposit, but that is it. I walked out of the house to the sound of Mia starting to cry, a wailing siren that followed me all the way to my car. I drove home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I felt like the villain in my own life story. They had twisted it so effectively, they had made my boundary look like cruelty. I spent the rest of the evening pacing around my living room, trying to shake the guilt. I told myself I was right. I told myself that Dana would be proud of me. But the silence of the house felt different tonight. It felt heavy. Later that night, I was lying in bed, doom-scrolling on social media, trying to turn my brain off. I refreshed my feed, and a photo popped up that made my blood run cold. It was a picture of my house. It was taken from the street, likely from a car window. The yellow siding looked bright and cheerful. The oak tree in the front yard was framed perfectly. It was posted by Lauren. The caption read, "New chapter coming soon. So grateful for family who steps up when things get hard. Blessed fresh start family." First, I stared at the screen. The post had been up for 40 minutes. It already had 30 likes and a dozen comments. "OMG congrats," wrote one of her high school friends. "So happy for you guys. You deserve a yard," wrote another. Moving on up. She was publicly claiming my house. She was planting a flag. I didn't text this time. I called her. She answered on the first ring, her voice breezy, as if she hadn't just screamed at me over roast beef 3 hours ago. Hey, Hales, what is up? I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. Lauren, take it down. Take what down? The picture of my house, the one you just posted on Facebook and Instagram. Take it down. Now. Oh, that? She laughed. You are being paranoid. I didn't say it was your house. I just posted a pretty picture. Lauren, everyone in the comments thinks you are moving in. You captioned it, new chapter. You are lying to people. I am not lying, she said, her voice dropping the innocent act. I am manifesting. That is what you do. You put your intentions out into the universe. You are not manifesting my house. Lauren, I told you no. Yeah, well, Mom and Dad seem to think you are just having a panic attack about the change, she said dismissively. They have been telling Aunt Claire and the cousins that we are moving in next month. They said you just need a minute to get used to the idea. So I am just getting everyone ready. My stomach dropped. They weren't just pressuring me. They were overruling me. They were creating a social reality that would be embarrassing for me to dismantle. They were banking on the fact that I wouldn't want to look like the bad guy to the extended family. You need to correct them, I said, my voice shaking. You need to tell them that you are not moving in. I am not telling them anything. Lauren said, you can tell them if you want to be the one to break everyone's heart. But honestly, Haley, you are being ridiculous. It is just a house. We are family. Stop being so selfish. She hung up. I stared at the phone. I felt a surge of rage so pure it almost scared me. I dialed my parents' home number. Martin answered. Hello? Dad, tell people Lauren is not moving in. Haley, it is late, he said, his voice calm, reasonable. I saw the post. Dad, I know what you are telling Aunt Claire. I know what you are doing. You are trying to bully me into this. Nobody is bullying you, he said. We are just optimistic. We know you. Haley, you have a good heart. You will do the right thing eventually. We are just preparing the ground. The right thing is me living in my own house, alone. I said, I am telling you, explicitly, right now. Do not pack a single box for my address. Do not tell anyone else they are coming here. It is not happening. There was a pause on the line, a long, heavy silence. You don't have to decide that today, Martin said. His voice was chillingly calm. It wasn't angry. It was the voice of a parent speaking to a toddler having a tantrum. We will talk about it when you have calmed down. He hung up. I threw my phone onto the mattress. I screamed into my empty room. They weren't listening. They literally could not hear the word no coming from my mouth. To them, my no was just a negotiating position. It was a hurdle to be cleared, not a wall to be respected. The next day at work was a blur. I was a project manager at a mid-sized tech firm, and I was up for a promotion to senior lead. I had a presentation in 3 days, the kind of presentation that determined the trajectory of the next 5 years of my career. It was a pitch to our biggest client, a logistics company looking to overhaul their entire software suite. I sat at my desk, staring at the PowerPoint slides. The words swam in front of me. Synergy, optimization, scalability. All I could see was Lauren's Facebook post. All I could hear was Martin's voice saying, You don't have to decide that today. I typed a sentence, then deleted it. I couldn't focus. My hands were shaking. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, expecting a text from a cousin congratulating me on becoming a roommate again. Haley? I looked up. Dana was standing at the edge of my cubicle, holding 2 coffees. She looked concerned. You have been staring at that one slide for 20 minutes. She said, You haven't blinked. I rubbed my face. I am losing my mind. Dana. She pulled up a chair. Talk to me. I told her everything. The dinner, the demand, the social media post, the gaslighting. They are acting like it is a done deal. I whispered, afraid my voice would crack. They are telling people. They are ignoring me. Dana, am I crazy? Am I being selfish? Maybe I should just let them stay for a few months. Maybe I am being a brat. Dana slammed her coffee cup down on the desk. It wasn't loud enough to disturb the office, but it made me jump. Stop it, she hissed. That is exactly what they want you to feel. That is the programming. Haley. They have installed that button in your brain for 30 years, and now they are mashing it. You are not selfish. You are a 32-year-old woman who bought a house. You are not a boarding house. You are not a shelter. But they helped me with my car. I said weakly, "So? I bought you a bagel yesterday. Does that mean I can move in and wear your clothes?" "No, that is transactional guilt. It is manipulation." She leaned in closer. "You need to lock this down. Legally, you need to know exactly where you stand, because they are not playing by the rules of polite society. They are playing by the rules of a hostile takeover." She was right. I needed armor. I needed facts that didn't care about feelings. I took an early lunch and went to see Luke, a financial advisor I had used a few times for retirement planning. His office was quiet, smelling of leather and old paper. I sat across from him, twisting my hands in my lap. "Luke, I need to know something. My parents co-signed a student loan for me when I was 18, a small one. It is almost paid off, but their names are still on it. Does that give them any claim to my assets? To my house?" Luke adjusted his glasses and typed something into his computer. He pulled up my file. He looked at me, his expression kind but professional. "Haley, did they co-sign the mortgage?" "No, just me." "Is their name on the deed?" "No, just me." "Did they provide the down payment? Gift funds?" "No. Every cent was mine." "Then the answer is no," Luke said firmly. "A co-signed student loan creates a liability for them if you default on that specific loan. It does not grant them an equity interest in your future real estate purchases. They have zero legal claim to your home. Zero. It is your property. You have full legal control over occupancy." I let out a breath. "But they keep bringing it up, like I owe them. That is emotional leverage. Haley, not legal leverage. In the eyes of the law, you are a stranger to them regarding this property. You could evict them if they were tenants. You can certainly bar them from entering if they are not." I left his office feeling a little steadier. The law was on my side. The deed was on my side. I just had to be strong enough to enforce it. I went back to work and managed to grind out 3 solid hours of prep for the presentation. I channeled my anger into the slides. I made the data look aggressive. I made the timelines tight. I needed this promotion. I needed the raise. If I was going to be at war with my family, I needed resources. That evening, I didn't go home right away. I went to the gym and ran on the treadmill until my legs felt like jelly. I didn't want to go back to the house. I was afraid I would find them sitting on my porch steps, waiting. When I finally got home, it was dark. The house was quiet. No cars in the driveway. No people on the porch. I let myself in, locking the door immediately. I made a salad and sat at the kitchen island, opening my laptop to check my personal email. I wanted to see if the title company had sent over the final digital copies of the deed, just so I could print them out and have them ready. My inbox was the usual clutter: newsletters, receipts, spam, but one subject line caught my eye. FWD, enrollment confirmation, pending residency, verification. The sender was Lauren Miller. My brow furrowed. Why was she sending me this? I clicked on it. The body of the email was a forward. It was originally from the Brookridge Elementary School registrar, sent to Lauren's email address earlier that afternoon. "Dear Mrs. Miller, this email is to confirm that we have received the preliminary enrollment application for Toby Miller for the upcoming semester. As discussed, because the address provided, 1402 Oak Street, is different from your current residence on file, we have flagged the application for pending residency verification. Please note that we will require a utility bill or a lease agreement in your name at the 1402 Oak Street address within 10 days to finalize Toby's placement in the district. Thank you. Brookridge Administration." Above that, Lauren had typed a message. "Mom, look, they took the application. I just need to get a utility bill from Haley's pile. Can you grab one when you go over there for the mail tomorrow?" I froze. My blood ran cold, then hot. She hadn't meant to send it to me. I looked at the recipients. She had started typing Mom, or maybe Martin, but my email, Haley, must have auto-populated, and in her haste, she hit send without checking. I read it again. Can you grab one when you go over there for the mail tomorrow? They weren't just planning to move in. They were actively committing fraud. They were planning to steal my mail. They were planning to forge residency documents to get Toby into the school district assigned to my house. I looked at the address in the email. 1402 Oak Street. My address. The audacity was breathtaking. They were treating my home like a public utility they had a right to tap into. And the part about grabbing a bill from my pile? That meant they intended to come into my house, or at least go through my mailbox, without my permission. I remembered the key. The spare key I had given my dad a week ago, just after moving in, when he said, "You need a backup. Haley, what if you lock yourself out?" I had given it to him, I had trusted him, and now, according to this email, he was going to use it to enter my home and steal a utility bill so my sister could lie to a government entity. I sat there in the glow of the laptop screen, the silence of the house pressing in on me. The manifesting wasn't a spiritual exercise. It was a calculated administrative strategy. I printed the email. The printer hummed and spat out the page. I held the warm paper in my hand. This wasn't a family squabble anymore. This was evidence. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole, half expecting to see Martin lurking by the mailbox. The street was empty. I went back to the kitchen and looked at the spare key hook where I usually kept my car keys. I looked at the sliding glass door. I looked at the windows. I wasn't safe, not from burglars, but from the people who had raised me. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Lauren. I didn't call my parents. I called the non-emergency line for the school district, but it was after hours, so I did the next best thing. I dialed the number for the locksmith I had seen on a magnet on my fridge, a remnant from the previous owner. "It is 9 o'clock at night," a gruff voice answered. "Emergency rates apply." "I don't care," I said, my voice steady and cold. "I need my locks changed. Tonight. All of them." And while I waited for the locksmith, I sat at my table with the printed email, watching the front door, realizing that the war hadn't just started. It was already in full swing, and I was the only one who hadn't realized I was under attack. The morning sun was hitting my kitchen island, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but I felt nothing but a cold, heavy dread settling in my stomach. The printed email from the school district sat on the counter next to my coffee cup. I had stared at it for hours the night before, and now, in the harsh light of day, it looked even more damning. I picked up my phone. My thumb hovered over the keypad. This was the point of no return. Calling Lauren would be an argument. Calling the school was an act of war. It was legal. It was bureaucratic. It was permanent. But if I didn't make the call, I was complicit. If I didn't make the call, I was accepting the premise that my address was community property. I dialed the number for the Brookridge Elementary School Administration Office. "Brookridge Elementary. This is Sarah speaking." My voice was steady, practiced from years of managing difficult client calls, though my hand was shaking. "Hi, Sarah. My name is Haley Price. I am the owner of the property at 1402 Oak Street. Yes, Ms. Price, how can I help you? I received a forwarded email regarding a residency verification for a student named Toby Miller at my address. I heard the clicking of a keyboard on the other end. Ah, yes, Toby Miller. We have a pending registration. We just need a utility bill in the guardian's name to finalize it. That is the problem," I said, taking a breath. "Toby Miller does not live here. His parents, Lauren and Chase Miller, do not live here. I am the sole resident of this property. I did not authorize the use of my address for this enrollment." The typing stopped abruptly. "I see," the receptionist said, her tone shifting from helpful to officious. "You are stating that the residency claim is false?" "Yes, they live in a different district. I wanted to correct the record before any further paperwork was processed. Thank you for letting us know. Ms. Price, we take residency fraud very seriously. I will have to flag this application. It may trigger an investigation into the family's current address to determine proper zoning. If they knowingly falsified documents, there could be penalties." I felt a wave of nausea. Penalties. Investigation. I didn't want Lauren arrested. I just wanted her to stop using my house as a stepping stone. I understand. I said, I just needed to be clear that I'm not housing them. I hung up and slumped against the counter. It was done. I had drawn the line in ink. 30 minutes later, my phone erupted. It wasn't a text. It was a call from Lauren. I let it ring 3 times before answering, bracing myself. Hello? You called them? Lauren's voice was high, tight, and wet with tears. You actually called the school? I closed my eyes. Lauren, you used my address without asking. You were planning to steal my mail to forge a utility bill. I saw the email you accidentally sent me. I wasn't stealing, she screamed. I was borrowing. It is a piece of paper. Haley, a stupid piece of paper. Do you have any idea what you just did? They called me. They said my application is flagged for fraud. Fraud? They threatened to ban us from the district appeals process. You committed fraud. Lauren, that is what happened. I was trying to get Toby into a good school, she sobbed, the anger collapsing into hysteria. The school by our duplex has mold in the gym and test scores in the basement. I just wanted him to have a chance. I wanted him to be safe. And you wrecked it. You sabotaged your own nephew's future because you are so obsessed with your precious rules. I am not sabotaging him. I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I am protecting myself. You can't just lie to the government using my name. If you had asked me, if I had asked, you would have said no. You always say no. You are so rigid. Haley, you sit in that big empty house with your perfect job and you judge us for trying to survive. I hung up. I couldn't do it. I couldn't listen to her twist my legal liability into a moral failing. For the next 3 days, there was silence. No texts, no calls, no passive-aggressive Facebook posts. It was a terrifying silence, like the pullback of the ocean before a tsunami. Then, on Thursday, a text from Mom. We need to talk. We can't leave things like this. Come over for dinner on Friday. Let's just sit down and clear the air. Please. I hesitated. Part of me knew it was a trap, but the other part of me, the part that was still a daughter who wanted her parents to love her, hoped that maybe the school incident had been a wake-up call. Maybe they realized they had pushed too far. I agreed. I drove over at 6 o'clock on Friday. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn where I used to play tag. I parked my car and walked up the driveway, taking deep breaths, boundaries. I told myself, state your needs, be firm but kind. I opened the front door. I expected to see my parents sitting at the kitchen table, maybe a somber, serious discussion. Instead, I walked into a full house. Lauren was there, sitting on the sofa with red, puffy eyes. Chase was standing by the fireplace, arms crossed, looking at the floor. The kids, Toby and Mia, were playing on the rug with a loud, beeping electronic toy. My Aunt Claire was there, sitting in the armchair. My parents were standing in the center of the room like moderators. It wasn't a dinner, it was an intervention. I stopped in the entryway, my hand still on the doorknob. I thought this was just us. I said, looking at Mom. We are all family. Haley, Colleen said, her voice dripping with that specific brand of maternal disappointment that cuts deeper than a knife. And this affects all of us. Come in. Sit down. I didn't sit. I stood behind the sofa, creating a physical barrier between myself and them. What is this? We need to resolve this, Martin said. He gestured to Lauren. Your sister is in a state. Haley, this school thing. You really went too far. Calling the administration? That was vindictive. It was legal. Dad, she was using my address. It is a family address, Lauren burst out, shredding a tissue in her hands. It is all family. Why do you have to be so compartmentalized? Why is everything mine and yours with you? Because I bought it. I said, I paid for it. Martin held up a hand. Okay, let's not get into the finances again. We know you have the money. Haley, we know you are successful. We are very proud of you. But success comes with responsibility. I felt my jaw tighten. Responsibility to whom? To the family, he said, as if it were obvious. Look, We have always operated a certain way. We pool our resources. When your car broke down, we fixed it. When Claire needed help with her surgery, we all chipped in. Resources rotate to where they are needed most. Right now, Lauren is the one in need. You are the one with the surplus. It is not a surplus. I said, it is my home. It is where I live. It is not a bank account you can draw from. Lauren looked up at me, her eyes burning. We were counting on you, she whispered. I looked at her, baffled. Why? I never said yes. I said no. I said no repeatedly. Why were you counting on something I explicitly denied? Because we thought you would come around, Chase shouted. He had never raised his voice at me before, and it made me flinch. We thought once you saw how bad off we were, you would step up. We thought you were a decent person. I am a decent person, I shot back. I offered you $2,000. I offered to help you move. $2,000 doesn't fix this, Chase said, stepping forward. Chase, calm down, Mom said, putting a hand on his arm. She turned to me. Haley, look at them. Look at your niece and nephew. They need stability. Your house has 2 bedrooms. It has a yard. It is safe. Why is your privacy more important than their safety? I felt like I was drowning in a sea of irrationality. I tried to pivot. I tried to find a logical exit. Okay, look, if the duplex is the problem, let's find another solution. There are apartments in Riverdale. They are cheaper. Riverdale is unsafe. Lauren spat. Then downsizing. A 1-bedroom until you save up? With 2 kids? Are you insane? I took a deep breath. Okay, then what about you stay here? With Mom and Dad. They have a guest room. They have a den. Mom looked affronted. We are in our 60s. Haley, we can't have 2 toddlers running around 24/7. We have earned our quiet time. I almost laughed. It was so absurd. You have earned your quiet time. But I haven't? I worked 80-hour weeks for 5 years to get that house. It is different, Martin said sternly. You are young. You have the energy. And you are alone. You don't need all that space. I gripped the back of the sofa. I am not letting you move in. I am sorry. I love you. But the answer is no. It is a final no. The room went silent. The only sound was the beeping of Toby's toy truck. Then Chase spoke again. His voice was quieter, but heavier. Well, you better figure something out, he said, because we already gave notice. I froze. I stared at him. You what? We gave notice to our landlord, he said, avoiding my eyes. We told him we would be out by the 1st of the month. My mouth fell open. Why would you do that? I told you no. We thought it was settled, Lauren cried out. Mom said you were just having cold feet. She said you would calm down and it would be fine. We had to give 30 days' notice to get our deposit back. I looked at my mother. She didn't look ashamed. She looked defiant. I just had faith in you. Haley, she said, I had faith that you wouldn't let your sister be homeless. You created a crisis, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and horror. You artificially created a crisis to force my hand. You burned your bridge so you would have to cross mine. It is not a game. Haley, Martin shouted. They have to be out in 10 days. Where are they supposed to go? I don't know, I yelled back. I honestly don't know. But they are not coming to my house. I turned and walked to the door. Haley, if you walk out that door, you are turning your back on this family, my father bellowed. I stopped. I didn't turn around. Then I guess I am, I said. I walked out. I got in my car. I locked the doors. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't get the key in the ignition for a full 10 seconds. I drove straight to the nearest big box electronics store. I didn't go home. I couldn't go home yet. I felt exposed. I felt like my house had glass walls. I walked into the store and found the smart home aisle. I bought everything. I bought a video doorbell with 2-way audio. I bought 3 outdoor floodlight cameras with motion sensors. I bought an indoor camera for the living room. I bought a smart lock that required a code and a fingerprint, one that logged every entry and exit. I spent nearly $800. I put it on my credit card without blinking. I drove home and spent the entire night installing them. I climbed ladders in the dark. I drilled holes into my pristine siding. I synced everything to my phone. I changed my Wi-Fi password to a random string of 20 characters. Then, I sat in my kitchen and thought about the keys. I had given my dad a spare key the day I moved in. Just in case. I went to the drawer where I kept my spare set to double-check. It was there. But then I remembered something. A few weeks ago, just after the housewarming, they had come over while I was at work to water the plants, because I had mentioned I was worried about the ferns dying. I had told them where the hide-a-key was under the fake rock. I went outside. I checked the fake rock. The key was there. But had they copied it? I stared at the silver piece of metal. Of course they had. They had planned to move in. They had given notice to their landlord. They wouldn't have done that without a way to get in. I should have changed the physical locks right then. But it was 2 a.m. I was exhausted. I was emotionally drained, and I thought, foolishly, that the confrontation tonight had been the end of it. I had screamed at them. I had told them no to their faces. Surely, even they wouldn't try to break in after that. I set the alarm on my new security system and went to bed, watching the camera feeds on my phone until I passed out. 3 days passed. Silence again. I had a regional leadership conference in Chicago. It had been on my calendar for months. I considered canceling, but I couldn't. This promotion was the only thing I had that was purely mine, untouched by the drama. I left on a Tuesday morning. I packed my bag. I checked the locks 3 times. I checked the camera feeds. The house was secure. I drove to the airport, flew to Chicago, and checked into the hotel. The room was beautiful, clean, white sheets, a view of the city. It felt safe. I exhaled for the first time in weeks. I ordered room service. I prepped for my seminars. Wednesday morning, I was in a breakout session on team management. My phone was on the table. Face up. It buzzed. A text from Mrs. Kravitz, my next-door neighbor. She was a nosy woman with a heart of gold and a vigilance that rivaled the NSA. "Hey dear, did you move your trip up? Thought you said you weren't moving." My blood froze. I picked up the phone. I texted back. "I am in Chicago. What do you mean?" 3 dots, then an image loaded. It was a photo taken from her porch. There was a moving truck parked in my driveway. Not a professional van, but a large U-Haul. The back was open. I stood up, knocking my chair over. The presenter stopped talking. Everyone looked at me. "I am sorry," I stammered. "Family emergency." I ran out of the conference room and into the hallway. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone. I opened the security app I had installed just days ago. Front door camera. Live. I tapped it. The video feed loaded. The quality was crisp. 1080p high-definition horror. My parents' sedan was parked on the street. Chase's truck was on the lawn, actually on the grass, and the U-Haul was backed up to my front door. I watched, helpless, as Martin walked out of my front door carrying a lamp. My lamp. He set it down on the porch and turned back inside. Then Lauren walked out. She was carrying a box labeled Kids' Clothes, Winter. She looked stressed but determined. She walked right past the camera, her face clear as day. How did they get in? I switched to the living room camera. The feed showed the front door wide open. Chase was maneuvering a mattress through the entryway. A mattress I didn't own. It was a queen size, stained in one corner. They hadn't broken the door down. There was no shattered glass. Then I saw it. On the small entry table, where I usually dropped my mail, sat a key ring. It wasn't my ring. It had a goofy, oversized plastic keychain on it, a souvenir from a beach trip we took years ago. It was the spare key, the one I had given Dad for emergencies, or maybe the one they had copied from the hide-a-key. It didn't matter. They had a key. They had waited. They had waited until I posted on LinkedIn that I was at the conference. They knew I would be gone for 2 days. They were moving in. I watched Colleen walk into the frame. She was holding a stack of my plates, my good crate barrel dinner plates. She was moving them from the cabinet to a cardboard box on the floor. "Be careful with those," she told Chase, her voice tinny through the phone speaker. "We need to clear this cupboard for the sippy cups. She was packing my life away to make room for theirs. I sank to the floor of the hotel hallway, clutching the phone. I felt violated in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't just trespassing, it was an erasure. They were rewriting the reality of my home. They were betting that once they were in, once the beds were assembled and the clothes were in the closet, I would be too weak to kick them out. They were banking on my guilt. They were wrong. I tapped the microphone icon on the app. The little speaker symbol turned green. Two-way audio enabled. I took a breath. I watched them on the tiny screen. My mother, my father, my sister, my brother-in-law, busy as ants, dismantling my sanctuary. I brought the phone to my lips. "Get out!" I screamed. On the screen. Everyone froze. Martin dropped the lamp. It shattered on the porch. Colleen spun around, looking wildly at the ceiling. "Get out of my house!" I roared, not caring who heard me in the hotel. "The police are on their way." Lauren looked directly at the doorbell camera, her face paling. "Haley?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I hung up the feed and dialed 911. "Brookridge Dispatch. What is your emergency?" "I need police at 1402 Oak Street immediately," I said, my voice cold and hard as iron. "I have intruders in my home. I'm watching them on camera. They are moving furniture in. Do you know the intruders, ma'am?" "Yes," I said. "They are my parents, and I want them removed." I hung up the phone and watched the feed again. They were arguing now. Martin was gesturing at the door. Chase was looking at the truck. Lauren was crying. I didn't feel guilty anymore. I didn't feel sad. I felt like the owner of a $350,000 home who was finally cleaning house. The audio connection on the doorbell camera crackled as I pressed the microphone button again. I was sitting on the carpet of the hotel hallway in Chicago. My knees pulled up to my chest, staring into the small rectangle of light on my phone screen. The hallway smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and faint cigarette smoke, a stark contrast to the sunny, chaotic scene unfolding on my front porch 400 miles away. I said, "Get out!" My voice boomed through the tiny speaker on the doorframe. It sounded tinny and distorted, like a ghost haunting its own house. "You do not have permission to be there. Put the boxes down and leave." On the screen, the tableau was frozen. The movers, two burly guys in blue shirts, looked confused. One of them was holding the corner of a mattress, halfway through the door. My father, Martin, was red-faced, looking around the porch as if searching for a hidden camera crew. Lauren was standing near the railing, clutching a box marked Kitchen Essentials. Lauren looked directly at the doorbell camera, her eyes wide and wet. "Haley?" she said, her voice trembling but audible through the sensitive microphone. "Haley, stop it. You are embarrassing us." "I am embarrassing you?" I asked, my voice shaking with a rage so cold it felt like ice in my veins. "You are breaking into my house." "We are not breaking in," Lauren shouted back, stomping her foot like a petulant teenager. "You said we could stay. You told Mom on the phone that we could stay until we found something else. Why are you lying to these people?" She gestured to the movers, who were now exchanging uneasy glances. "I never said that." I said clearly, "I told you no. I told you no repeatedly. I told you no at dinner. I told you no on the phone. This is trespassing." Martin stepped forward, trying to block the camera view with his body. He put on his best authoritative father voice, the one that used to make me cower when I was 16. "Haley, that is enough," he barked. "We are moving in. We can discuss the details when you get back. But right now, you are making a scene. We have a truck rented by the hour. Stop playing games." "I am not playing." "Dad," I said, "I am calling the police." I cut the audio feed, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I didn't close the app, keeping the video live in a small window while I dialed the Brookridge Police non-emergency line. I didn't want to tie up the emergency dispatch, but I needed a patrol car there immediately. Brookridge Police Department. Dispatcher Evans. "My name is Haley Price," I said, forcing my voice to be steady. "I am the owner of the home at 1402 Oak Street. I am currently out of town, but I'm watching my security feed." There are individuals attempting to move furniture into my home without my consent. Are they breaking and entering, ma'am? Or do they have a key? They have a key that was not authorized for this use. I explained, they are family members, but they have been explicitly told they cannot reside there. I need an officer to remove them. I see, the dispatcher said. Her tone shifted slightly, becoming less urgent. A domestic dispute. We can send a unit out to check on the situation. But if they have a key and are family, it might be a civil matter. It is trespassing. I insisted, please just send someone. I switched back to the camera app while I waited. The scene had evolved. The movers had set the mattress down on the porch and were talking to Martin. I zoomed in on the video, straining to hear the audio. She is just confused, Martin was saying, waving his hand dismissively. She is under a lot of stress at work. Big presentation. She gets like this, high-strung. We are just trying to get the grandkids settled before she gets back so she doesn't have to worry about it. One of the movers scratched his head. Look, buddy, if the owner is screaming through the doorbell, we can't really go inside. Liability, you know? Colleen, my mother, pushed past Martin. She looked indignant. She is not the owner. Well, she is on paper, but it is a family home. We all pitched in. She is just having a panic attack. Just put the beds in the back room. I will take full responsibility. I wanted to scream, but I kept my mouth shut. I needed the police to hear this. 10 minutes later, a squad car pulled up to the curb. 2 officers stepped out. I didn't recognize them. They walked up the driveway, their hands resting on their belts. The movers immediately stepped back, looking relieved to have an authority figure intervene. I hit the microphone button again. Officers, I shouted. I am the homeowner. I am on the speaker. The taller officer looked at the doorbell camera, squinting in the sunlight. Ma'am, you are the one who called? Yes, I said. My name is Haley Price. I am the sole owner of this property. These people are my parents and my sister. They do not live here. They do not have a lease. They do not have my permission to be inside. I want them removed. The officer turned to Martin. Sir, is this true? Martin let out a long, exasperated sigh, the sound of a man dealing with an unreasonable child. Officer, this is a misunderstanding. My daughter is in Chicago. We are just moving her sister in for a few weeks. A temporary arrangement. We have a key. He held up the key ring, the one with the goofy beach souvenir I had noticed earlier. Officer, I cut in. That key was given for emergency watering of plants. It does not grant residency. I have texts and emails proving I denied their request to move in. If they enter that house, I want to press charges for trespassing. The officer looked between Martin and the blinking blue light of the doorbell. He adjusted his stance. Sir, the homeowner is explicitly revoking consent. He said, It doesn't matter if you have a key. If she says you can't be here, you can't be here. But we have a truck full of furniture. Lauren wailed. She was crying in earnest now, hugging herself. We gave up our apartment. We have nowhere to go. That is a civil matter. Ma'am, the officer said, his voice firm but not unkind. But I can't let you move belongings into a residence where the owner is barring entry. You need to pack it up. Martin's face went from red to purple. This is ridiculous. I am her father. I paid for the down payment on this house. That was a lie. A bold-faced, verifiable lie. Officer, he did not. I said, I have the closing documents. I paid every cent. Please make them leave. The officer turned back to Martin. Sir, you need to tell the movers to load the truck back up. You can't stay here. If you refuse to leave the property, we will have to issue a trespass warning. There was a long, tense silence. Martin glared at the doorbell camera, his eyes boring into the lens as if he could see me sitting on the hotel floor 400 miles away. Fine, he spat. He turned to the movers. Load it back up. I watched as the movers, looking annoyed, began hoisting the mattress back onto the truck. Lauren sat on the porch steps, sobbing into her hands. Colleen stood by the door, her arms crossed, shaking her head in disgust. After the movers drove away, the police officers lingered for a moment. then got back in their car. I thought it was over, but then I saw my parents turn back toward the house. They didn't leave. They walked inside. I switched to the interior camera in the living room. Colleen walked into the kitchen. She slammed her purse onto the counter. Unbelievable. She seethed. She is absolutely heartless. Calling the cops on her own father? Martin walked in behind her, looking defeated and furious. She has lost her mind. Colleen. She has completely lost her mind. Lauren came in last, wiping her eyes. What are we going to do? The truck is gone. The stuff is in storage. Where are we sleeping tonight? We will go to a hotel, Martin said, and then we will figure this out. But I am not letting her get away with this. Colleen walked over to the fridge and opened it. She took out a pitcher of iced tea, my iced tea, and poured herself a glass. No cop is going to tell me I can't be in my own daughter's house, she declared loudly. Taking a sip, I changed her diapers. I paid for her college books. This house is just as much mine as it is hers. I watched them for another 10 minutes. They lingered. They paced. They touched my things. Eventually, they left. But not before Colleen deliberately knocked a stack of my mail onto the floor and left it there. I didn't sleep that night. I checked out of the hotel at 4 a.m. and caught the first flight back to Brookridge. I landed at 9. I drove straight home. The house looked normal from the outside. The sun was shining. The grass was green. But as I unlocked the front door, using my key, because they still had the spare, I felt a wave of nausea. I walked inside. The air felt stale, tainted. I took my phone out and started recording. I needed evidence. I needed to document the violation. I walked through the hallway. There were scuffs on the wall from where they had tried to maneuver the mattress. I walked into the dining room. Stacked in the corner were 3 large plastic bins. They were labeled in marker: Toby Toys, Mia Clothes, and Pantry. The movers had taken the big furniture, but my family had managed to stash these boxes inside before the police arrived. They were like anchors, little hooks they had sunk into my home to claim territory. I walked into the kitchen. The glass Colleen had used was sitting in the sink, unwashed, a lipstick stain on the rim. The mail she had knocked over was scattered across the tile. I walked into the spare bedroom. My office. The closet door was open. My books had been swept off the shelves and piled haphazardly on the floor to make room for, what? Stuffed animals? Then I went to my own bedroom. My dresser drawers were slightly ajar. I walked over to the filing cabinet in the corner. I kept it locked, but the key was in the top drawer of my nightstand, a habit I had never thought to break because I lived alone. The lock on the filing cabinet was disengaged. My stomach dropped. I pulled the drawer open. My file folders were there, but they were messy. Papers were sticking out at odd angles. I pulled out the folder marked Personal ID. I opened it. My birth certificate was there. My passport was gone. My social security card was gone. I rifled through the other folders. My deed was there. My car title was there. But the 2 most important documents for establishing identity were missing. I sat on the edge of my bed, the folder trembling in my hands. I remembered something from years ago, when I was 22 and moving into my first apartment. My dad had insisted on keeping photocopies of my important documents. For a backup folder, he had said, in case you lose yours. They had always treated my identity as an extension of their own. But taking the originals? Taking them now? In the midst of a residency dispute? A terrifying thought bloomed in my mind. They weren't just trying to move in physically, they were trying to establish a paper trail. If they had my passport and social, they could put utilities in my name at a new address. They could sign leases. They could enroll the kids in school and claim they were me, or that I was the guardian. They were weaponizing my identity. I stood up. I didn't cry. I was past crying. I was in a state of cold, clinical shock. I needed a lawyer. I found Kendra Carver through a quick Google search for real estate litigation Brookridge. She had a 5-star rating and a review that said, "She eats bullies for breakfast." I called her office and begged for an emergency appointment. The receptionist heard the panic in my voice and squeezed me in at 2 o'clock. Ms. Carver's office was sleek and modern, with glass walls and a view of the city skyline. Kendra herself was a sharp woman in her 50s with a silver bob and glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting, taking furious notes on a yellow legal pad. I showed her the video of the police encounter. I showed her the email about the school residency. I told her about the missing passport. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and took off her glasses. "Haley," she said, her voice low and serious, "you are in a very dangerous situation." "I know," I whispered. "Your parents are not just overstepping boundaries," she continued. "They are engaging in behavior that borders on criminal fraud. Taking the spare key to move in after being denied entry is trespassing. Taking your passport and social security card is theft. Using your address for school enrollment without your permission is residency fraud." She leaned forward. "You need to stop thinking of them as your parents. You need to start thinking of them as a hostile party in a legal dispute, because that is how they are treating you." "What do I do?" I asked. "First, the locks," she said. "You change them today. Not just rekey. You get high-security deadbolts, and you do not give a key to anyone, not a neighbor, not a friend, no one." "Second," she said, tapping the legal pad, "you need to send a certified letter. I will draft it for you. It will state formally that any permission to enter or occupy the property is revoked. It will put them on notice that further attempts to enter will be met with criminal charges." "Criminal charges?" I choked out. "Against my mom and dad? If they break into your house?" "Haley, they are criminals," she said bluntly. "You need to draw a hard line. And finally, the missing documents. You need to file a police report. Today." I flinched. "A police report feels so extreme." "Ms. Carver looked me dead in the eye. "They stole your passport. Haley, do you know what they can do with that? They can open lines of credit. They can sign contracts. You need a paper trail proving that those documents were taken without your consent, so that when, not if, but when, they use them, you are not held liable." She was right. I knew she was right. I left her office with a draft of the letter and a heavy heart. I drove to the police station. Filing the report was a surreal experience. I sat at a metal desk across from a bored officer and dictated the list of stolen items. "Suspects?" he asked, pen hovering over the form. "Martin and Colleen Price." I said, "My parents." He looked up, raising an eyebrow. But he wrote it down. I left the station and called the locksmith, the same one I had called before. But this time I asked for the heavy-duty commercial-grade locks. By 6 o'clock that evening, my house was a fortress. The new locks were installed. The security cameras were active. I had moved the bins of toys and clothes into the garage. Stacking them near the door, I sat on my couch. The silence of the house pressing in on me. I felt safe, but I also felt incredibly alone. I picked up my phone. I had to send the text. The certified letter would arrive in a few days, but they needed to know tonight. I opened a group chat with Martin, Colleen, and Lauren. I typed slowly, my fingers stiff. "I have returned home. The locks have been changed. Do not attempt to use the old key. It will not work. The items you left inside the house, the toy bins and clothes, have been placed in the garage. The garage code is 1234. You may come and retrieve them tomorrow between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m. Do not attempt to enter the main house. If you do, or if you attempt to enter the property outside of that window, I will treat it as trespassing. I have also filed a police report regarding my missing passport and social security card. If those are returned to the mailbox by tomorrow morning, I will not press the investigation further." I read it over. It sounded cold. It sounded like a lawyer wrote it. I hit send. I stared at the screen, waiting. For a long time, nothing happened. No 3 dots, no red receipt. The silence stretched for 5 minutes, then 10. Then, the dam broke. My phone vibrated so hard it rattled on the coffee table. "Martin, how dare you? After everything we have done for you, you are threatening your own father with police? You are a sick person. Haley." "Colleen, I raised you better than this. Cruel. Absolutely cruel. We are trying to keep this family together and you are tearing it apart over some floorboards. Your niece is crying asking why Aunt Haley hates her. Lauren, you filed a police report? Are you insane? We didn't steal anything. We were safe keeping them. You are such a liar. You are dead to me. Martin, vindictive. That is what you are. A vindictive, lonely girl who cares more about money than blood. You will regret this when you are old and alone in that empty house. I let the texts roll in. I didn't reply. I didn't block them. I just watched the words scroll up the screen, each one a hammer blow to the foundation of the relationship I thought I had. Safekeeping. That was their word for theft. Family. That was their word for obedience. I put the phone down and walked to the window. I looked out at the street. It was empty. The streetlights were flickering on. I was safe. I was the owner. I was in control. But as I stood there in the quiet dark, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic buzzing of my phone, I realized that Ms. Carver was wrong about one thing. She said I needed to stop thinking of them as parents. But that was the problem. They were my parents. And the people who were supposed to protect me were the ones I had to build a fortress against. I went to the kitchen and checked the back door lock one more time. It clicked solidly into place. Then I went to the garage and checked the bins. Toby toys. I took a black permanent marker from the drawer and wrote on the side of the bin, in large block letters, "Pick up only." It was petty, it was small, but it was the only way I knew how to say that this was no longer a negotiation. This was an eviction. The days following the lock change were not quiet. They were a digital siege. My phone became a device of torture. I would be sitting in a meeting at work, discussing timelines and deliverables, and my watch would vibrate with a preview of a text that made my stomach turn. "How can you sleep at night?" My mother wrote at 10 in the morning on a Tuesday, "Your sister is crying in a motel room because she is terrified for her children. And you are sitting in that empty house polishing your ego." Then, an hour later, a text from Lauren. It started with a plea. "Hales, please, we are at the Best Western on Route 9. The kids are scared. Just let us in for a week. Just 1 week while we find a place. I promise we will sign whatever you want." When I didn't reply, the tone shifted violently. "You are a cold, childless robot." She fired off 20 minutes later. "You care more about your precious hardwood floors than you do about people. You are going to die alone with your money, and nobody will come to your funeral." It was a pendulum swing of manipulation. Guilt, rage, begging, threats. I didn't block them. Ms. Carver had advised me to keep the lines open but unresponsive, to gather evidence of harassment. So I let the messages pile up like unread mail, a towering stack of digital venom. I followed Ms. Carver's instructions with the mechanical precision of a soldier. I went back to the police station to finalize the report. I sat across from the same desk sergeant, who now looked at me with a mixture of pity and familiarity. "I need to amend the report to include the missing documents." I told him. My passport and social security card were in a locked cabinet. "They are gone." He typed it in. "You are sure they didn't just misplace them?" "I am sure." I said, "They were in a folder labeled Personal ID." The folder was rifled through. Nothing else was taken. He gave me a case number. I took it and walked out into the gray afternoon. I felt hollow. I was criminalizing my parents. I was turning the people who taught me to tie my shoes into suspects in a larceny case. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone with credit bureaus. I placed fraud alerts on my Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax accounts. I set up a PIN number that would be required for any new credit inquiries. I was locking down my identity as tightly as I had locked down my front door. Then came the letter to the school. I drafted it carefully. To the Brookridge School District Administration. I am writing to formally clarify that I, Haley Price, am the sole resident of 1402 Oak Street. I have not authorized any other individuals, including Lauren Miller or her children, to use this address for residency or enrollment purposes. Any documents submitted stating otherwise were done so without my consent. I signed it, sealed it, and dropped it in the mailbox. It felt like sending an eviction notice to a 5-year-old. I hated myself for it, but I hated them more for making me do it. The social fallout began on Thursday. My Aunt Claire called me. Claire was my mother's older sister, the matriarch of the extended family, a woman who wielded gossip like a gavel. "Haley," she said, her voice sharp, "I just got off the phone with your mother." "Hello, Aunt Claire?" I said, bracing myself. "She tells me you changed the locks while the kids' beds were still inside." Claire said, "She says they were in the middle of moving in, with your blessing, and you suddenly snapped and threw them out on the street. She says the police had to stop you from throwing Mia's crib off the porch." I gripped the phone. "That is a lie, Claire. Every word of it." "Is it?" Claire asked. "Because Martin is telling people you are having a breakdown. He says the stress of the new job has made you unstable. He says they were just trying to help you manage the house, and you called the cops on them in a fit of hysteria. They are spinning a narrative." I said, my voice shaking. "They broke in. Claire, I was in Chicago. I watched them on my security cameras moving furniture in after I explicitly told them no. I don't know who to believe." "Haley," Claire sighed, "but throwing family out? It looks bad. People are talking. Cousin Sarah said she can't believe you would be so heartless to the little ones." I hung up. I didn't argue. Instead, I opened my photo gallery. I selected the screenshots of the text messages where I said, "No, you cannot move," and dated 3 weeks ago. I selected the video clip from the doorbell camera where I shouted, "Get out," and Lauren admitted, "You said we could stay only to be corrected by the officer." I selected the photo of the email Lauren sent me by mistake about the school fraud. I sent them all to Claire without a caption. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. It was Claire again. I answered. "Haley," she said. Her voice was different, quiet, shocked. "Did you see them?" I asked. "I saw them," she said. "The video. Martin lied to me. He said you were there. He said you opened the door for them. He lied." I said, "They have been lying about everything." There was a long silence on the line. Then Claire let out a heavy sigh, the sound of a secret being released. "You need to know something," she said. "What?" "Your parents. They are not just trying to help Lauren. They are desperate." "What do you mean?" 6 years ago, when Lauren wanted to start that online boutique, the one that sold the handmade jewelry? "Yeah, I remember." I said, "It folded after a year." She said the market was saturated. "It didn't just fold, Haley, it crashed. And Martin and Colleen funded it. They didn't just give her savings. They borrowed against the equity in their house. They took out a second mortgage." My eyes widened. "I didn't know that. Nobody knew." Claire said, "They were ashamed, but the business lost money hand over fist. Lauren spent thousands on inventory that never sold. And your parents are still paying that note. They are underwater, Haley. They have no retirement. They have no cushion." I sat down on my kitchen stool, the room spinning slightly. Claire continued, I think they were counting on your house as a backup plan for everyone, not just Lauren. If they could get Lauren settled with you, they could stop funneling money to her rent. Maybe they could even downsize themselves. They see your success as the family's life raft. It wasn't just entitlement, it was financial ruin. They were drowning, and they saw my $350,000 bungalow as the only piece of solid ground left. And instead of asking for help, instead of admitting they were in trouble, they tried to commandeer it. "Thanks for telling me." "Claire," I whispered, "watch your back." "Honey," she said, "desperate people do desperate things." The next few days were a blur of high-functioning anxiety. At work, I was in the final stages of prep for the logistics pitch. It was the biggest opportunity of my career. If we landed this client, I would be promoted to senior project lead. I would get a raise that would make the mortgage payments easy. I threw myself into the work. I built pivot tables. I designed graphics. I rehearsed my speech until I could say it in my sleep. I used the office as a shield, staying late every night so I didn't have to go home to the empty, fortified house. But the family didn't stop. On the morning of the presentation dry run, my dad sent a text. "Your mother had chest pains last night. We spent 4 hours in the ER. Doctor says it is stress-induced angina. If something happens to us because of all this stress, Haley, it will be on your conscience. I hope your house is worth your mother's life." I stared at the message in the break room, my hand trembling around a cup of coffee. It was a classic move, weaponized health. If I didn't comply, I was literally killing them. I didn't reply. I couldn't. I turned my phone off and went into the conference room. I delivered the dry run perfectly, but inside, I felt like I was bleeding out. That afternoon, Ms. Carver called. "Haley, do you have a minute?" Her voice was brisk, professional, but with an edge I hadn't heard before. "Yes," I said, stepping into a quiet hallway. "What is it?" My paralegal was running a standard background inquiry on the property, just to see if there were any other liens or filings we should be aware of. We found something disturbing. My stomach dropped. "What?" "There was a document submitted to a property management company called Apex Rentals 3 days ago. It appears to be an application for a rental unit in Lauren Miller's name." "Okay," I said, "that is good, right? She's looking for a place." Attached to the application was a document titled Proof of Current Residency and Landlord Reference. It is a letter, purportedly from you, stating that Lauren and her family have resided at 1402 Oak Street for the past 12 months, that they are tenants in good standing, and that they are moving out because you are selling the property. I gasped. "What?" "It gets worse." Ms. Carver said, "The letter guarantees their rent for the new unit, listing you as a guarantor. It has your signature at the bottom." I leaned against the wall, sliding down until I was crouching. "I never signed that. I never wrote that. They have only been residing here in their imagination." "I know," Ms. Carver said. "It is a forgery, and a clumsy one. The signature looks like it was traced from an old birthday card or something, but if Apex Rentals had accepted it, you could have been on the hook for their lease if they defaulted. And claiming you are selling the house? That is material misrepresentation. They are trying to use my credit," I whispered. "They stole my identity to get an apartment." Ms. Carver's voice was hard. "This is a felony. Haley, forgery, identity theft, fraud. We have the document. Apex flagged it because the dates didn't match the public record of your home purchase. You have only owned the house for a month, but the letter claims they lived there for a year. The timeline didn't add up, so they rejected the application. Thank God." I breathed. But the intent was there. She said, "Haley, we need to confront them. This isn't just a dispute anymore. They are actively trying to commit crimes in your name. I can't do this over the phone," I said, rubbing my temples. "I need to see them. I need to end this." I agreed, "but do not meet them alone, and do not meet them at the house." I set up the meeting for Friday night. I chose a restaurant called the Olive Branch. It was neutral ground, a chain Italian place with bright lights, laminated menus, and enough noise to discourage a scene, or so I hoped. I texted the group chat, "Meet me at the Olive Branch at 7 p.m. We need to talk. If you don't show up, the next communication you receive will be a court summons." They showed up. I arrived 10 minutes early and secured a booth near the back, but in full view of the waitstaff, I ordered a water and laid a manila folder on the table. Inside were the printouts, the school email, the forged landlord letter Ms. Carver had emailed me, and a copy of the police report, at 7 sharp. They walked in. Martin looked older. His shoulders were slumped, his face gray and drawn. Colleen looked furious, her lips pressed into a thin white line. Lauren walked behind them, wearing oversized sunglasses even though it was night, looking like a celebrity in hiding. Chase wasn't there. They slid into the booth opposite me, Martin and Colleen on one side, Lauren pulling up a chair to the head of the table. Nobody said hello. The waitress came over, sensed the radioactive tension, and quickly took drink orders before retreating. "So," Martin said, folding his hands on the table, "you are finally ready to talk sense." I looked at them. I felt a strange detachment. These were the faces I had looked up to my whole life. I had sought their approval. I had wanted them to be proud of me. Now, looking at them, I just saw strangers who owed me money and peace of mind. "I am ready to talk facts," I said. I opened the folder. I pulled out the first paper. The email from the school district. This, I said, sliding it across the table to Lauren, is fraud. You tried to enroll Toby using my address without my consent. You were going to steal my utility bill to prove it. Lauren didn't look at the paper. She looked at the wall. I told you. I was desperate. You are really going to hold that against me? A mother trying to help her child? Yes, I said. When it puts me at legal risk? Yes. I pulled out the second paper. The forged landlord letter. And this, I said, sliding it to Martin. This is a felony. Martin looked down at the document. His eyes flickered with recognition, then quickly hardened. You forged my signature, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. You created a fake rental history. You listed me as a guarantor for a lease I knew nothing about. You lied to a property management company and said I was selling my house. Colleen scoffed. She waved a hand dismissively. Oh, please. It was a formality. We needed a reference. Who else were we supposed to ask? Your sister has bad credit. We needed your name to get her foot in the door. My name is not a tool for you to use, I hissed. It is my name. You don't get to sign it. It wouldn't have hurt you, Colleen shot back, her voice rising. If she got the apartment, she would have paid the rent. You wouldn't have even known. We were trying to solve the problem so we wouldn't have to bother you anymore. You were trying to defraud a landlord. I said, and if she missed a payment? They would have come after me. They would have sued me. Martin slammed his hand on the table. The water glasses jumped. Enough, he shouted. The restaurant went quiet. People at nearby tables turned to look. Martin lowered his voice, leaning in, his face inches from the center of the table. You are talking about legalities. You are talking about paperwork. We are talking about survival. Haley, do you have any idea what we are dealing with? I know about the second mortgage. Dad, I said. He froze. The color drained from his face. I know you are underwater. I continued. Aunt Claire told me. I know you borrowed against the house for the boutique. I know you are broke. Colleen looked at Martin, panic in her eyes. Claire has a big mouth. She muttered. So that is what this is. I said. I was the retirement plan. My house was the lifeboat. You weren't just helping Lauren. You were consolidating. You were going to move everyone in, weren't you? Eventually? Martin didn't deny it. He just looked at me with a mixture of exhaustion and resentment. We are a family, he said gruffly. Families take care of each other. We took care of you for 18 years. We paid for your dance lessons. We paid for your braces. We co-signed your first loan. We invested in you. Invested, I repeated. The word tasted like ash. So I am an investment, and now you are calling in the dividends. If you had just done what you were supposed to, Martin muttered, looking down at his hands. None of this would matter. We wouldn't be sitting here arguing about signatures. You would have opened the door, and we would be safe. There it was, the naked truth. If you had just done what you were supposed to, my role was not to be a person. My role was to be a resource. My success was not mine to enjoy. It was theirs to harvest. I felt a final snap inside my chest. It wasn't loud. It was the quiet sound of a tether breaking. I reached out and took the papers back. I started to slide them into the folder. Colleen lunged. It was a fast, desperate motion. Her hand shot across the table, grabbing the corner of the forged letter. "Give me that!" she screeched. "You are not keeping that!" "Mom, stop!" I yelled, pulling back. She clawed at the folder, her nails digging into the manila. She ripped the paper, tearing the corner off. Martin grabbed her arm. "Colleen, stop it! People are watching!" She let go, breathing hard. Her face flushed red. She looked at me with pure hatred. "You ungrateful little brat," she spat. "You are going to send your own parents to jail? Is that it?" I smoothed the torn paper and put it back in the folder. I closed it firmly. "I am not sending you to jail," I said, my voice trembling. "Not today. But I am keeping this, and I'm keeping the police report." I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but I locked my knees. "Here is how this ends," I said. looking down at them. You are never to use my name, my address, or my credit again. If you do, if I see one more piece of mail, one more inquiry, one more attempt to access my property, I will file charges. I will hand this folder to the district attorney. Lauren was crying behind her sunglasses. You are destroying us, she whispered. No, I said, you destroyed us. I just bought a house. You made it a war zone. I put a $20 bill on the table for my water. Don't contact me. I said, not until you can respect that I am a separate person from you. I turned and walked away. I heard Colleen calling after me. Haley, Haley, come back here. I didn't stop. I walked out of the restaurant, into the cool night air. I walked to my car, got in, and locked the doors. I sat there for a moment, waiting for the tears, but they didn't come. I just felt tired. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion that went down to my marrow. I started the car and drove home. When I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. I hesitated, then pressed play. It was Lauren. Her voice was thick, distorted by crying and the bad connection of a car ride. You are dead to us, she said. You hear me? You have your house. Hope it keeps you warm. Because you don't have a family anymore. Don't come to Christmas. Don't come to birthdays. You chose the house, so you can stay in it. Alone. The message ended with a click. I looked up at my bungalow. The motion sensor floodlights I had installed flickered on, bathing the yard in a harsh, bright white light. The house looked stark. It looked impenetrable. I walked up the steps, unlocked the heavy deadbolt, and stepped inside. The silence was absolute. I was safe. I was secure. I had won. I slid down the front door and sat on the floor, the folder of evidence on my lap, and listened to the sound of absolutely nothing. The morning of the presentation, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with rain that hadn't fallen yet. I woke up at 5, my stomach a knot of anxiety that had nothing to do with software logistics and everything to do with the radio silence from my family. It had been a week since the restaurant, a week of dead air. I showered, dressed in my best navy suit, and drank 2 cups of black coffee. Before I left the house, I did something I had never done before on a workday. I went into my phone settings and toggled the Do Not Disturb switch. Then, I went a step further. I set it to total silence, allowing no exceptions for favorites. I looked at the screen one last time. No notifications. I drove to the office, the tires hissing on the damp pavement. When I walked in, Dana was already at her desk, arranging a stack of handouts. She took one look at my face and pulled me into the small kitchenette. You look like you are going to war, she said. I feel like it, I admitted. The family situation is on fire. Dana, I can't talk about it, or I will lose it, but I can't let it derail me today. This promotion is my exit strategy. It is my safety net. Dana nodded, her face serious. I got you. I will run interference. If anyone calls the main line looking for you, you are in a meeting. If they show up, well, security knows your name. Thanks, I said, gripping her arm. I went into the main conference room. The executives from the logistics firm were already there, shaking hands with my boss. I took a deep breath, put my phone face down on the table, and stepped into my professional skin. For the next 3 hours, Haley the daughter didn't exist. Only Haley the project lead, unbeknownst to me. While I was explaining the intricacies of supply chain integration, a very different kind of logistics operation was unfolding on my front lawn. At 9:30 in the morning, a moving truck pulled up to my house. It wasn't the same company as before. Maybe the previous one had blacklisted my address. This was a discount mover, a guy with a beat-up box truck and a helper in a ripped t-shirt. My parents and Lauren were in the car behind them. They had decided that the restaurant confrontation was just a bluff. They had convinced themselves that if they just showed up, if they just got the furniture inside, I would be too embarrassed to make a scene again. They were counting on my shame to be stronger than my boundaries. They were wrong. According to the footage I would watch later, Martin walked up to the front door with a confident stride, keys in hand, the old keys. He tried to insert the key into the lock. It didn't turn. He jiggled it. He pushed harder. Then he stepped back and saw it. Taped to the front door, at eye level, was a laminated sheet of paper. Ms. Carver had emailed it to me, and I had printed it at Kinko's on heavy cardstock. Notice of no trespass. To whom it may concern, access to this property, 1402 Oak Street, is restricted to the owner, Haley Price. No other individuals have permission to enter or occupy these premises. Any attempt to enter by force or by use of unauthorized keys will be treated as criminal trespass under Brookridge Penal Code Section 602. Reference Police Report, Case 24-9092. Violators will be prosecuted. Martin stared at the sign. He read it once. He read it twice. Colleen walked up behind him. What is it? Why isn't the key working? She saw the sign. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She actually put a sign up? Like we are criminals? Lauren came up the steps, carrying a lamp. What is going on? Martin turned around, his face a mask of fury. She changed the locks, and she posted a police notice. The mover walked up, chewing on a toothpick. He looked at the sign, then at Martin. Whoa, buddy. Police case number? I am not touching this. No, Martin stammered, his voice rising. It is a mistake. My daughter is just having an episode. We are family. The mover shook his head. Family or not, that is a legal notice. I am not getting arrested for a sofa. We are done here. As the mover turned to leave, Martin lost it. He started pounding on the door. Haley, open this door. I know you're in there. Stop this nonsense. Across the street, Mrs. McCravitz was sitting on her porch with her morning tea. She didn't just watch. She pulled out her phone and started recording. She filmed the movers getting back in their truck. She filmed Lauren screaming at the closed door. She filmed Colleen trying to peel the laminated sign off the wood, her fingernails scrabbling uselessly against the heavy tape. And then, the phone calls started. I was in the middle of the QA section of the presentation. The CEO of the logistics company asked a tough question about data redundancy. I answered it flawlessly, drawing a diagram on the whiteboard. I felt sharp. I felt powerful. My phone, face down on the table, vibrated. I ignored it. It vibrated again, and again, a continuous, angry buzz against the mahogany. I casually moved my notebook on top of it to muffle the sound. Martin called, then Colleen, then Lauren, then Chase, then the house line, then Martin again. They left voicemails. Haley, pick up the phone. The movers are leaving. You are costing us hundreds of dollars. Please, Haley, don't do this to your family. Lauren is hysterical. Just open the door. If something happens to your mother, it is on you. She is grabbing her chest. Haley, do you want her to have a heart attack on your porch? The calls didn't stop. They escalated. The sorrow turned to rage. The pleas turned to threats. You are cut out. You hear me? I am writing you out of the will. You will die alone in that empty house. I walked out of the conference room at 12:15, shaking hands with the executives. My boss gave me a thumbs up and mouthed, "Nailed it." I smiled. I felt a rush of adrenaline. I had done it. I walked to the elevator. Still high on the victory, I went down to the parking garage and got into my car. I picked up my phone. The screen lit up. 79 missed calls. 42 new messages. My stomach dropped through the floor. The adrenaline turned into cold dread. I sat in the dim light of the garage and started listening. I listened to my father's voice crack with rage. I listened to my mother's voice tremble with performative victimhood. I listened to Lauren screaming that I was a monster. 79 times they had tried to break through my wall. 79 times they had refused to accept my silence. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, numb paralysis. It was the feeling of watching a car crash in slow motion. I started the car and drove toward the exit, but before I merged onto the street, I called Ms. Carver. Haley? She answered on the first ring. Are you safe? I am leaving work. I said, what happened? I have 79 missed calls. Your neighbor called the police, Ms. Carver said. There was a disturbance. Your parents were pounding on the door and screaming. Mrs. Kravitz filmed it. Did they get in? No. The locks held. The notice did its job. The movers left. Thank God. The police arrived about 20 minutes ago. She continued. They issued a formal trespass warning to your parents. They told them that if they return to the property without your express invitation, they will be arrested. Arrested, I repeated. My parents. Yes, it is official now. Haley, the line has been drawn by law enforcement. I drove home in a daze. The rain had finally started. A slow, gray drizzle that matched my mood. When I turned onto my street, I expected to see police cars. But the street was quiet. Mrs. Kravitz was on her porch, knitting. She waved at me as I pulled in. I parked in the garage and went inside. The house was silent. The sign was still on the door, slightly peeled at one corner where Colleen had tried to remove it. I sat on the couch and waited. I knew it wasn't over. They wouldn't let the police be the last word. They needed the last word. At 6 o'clock, a car pulled up. I checked the camera. It was them. Martin, Colleen, and Lauren. No movers this time. Just them. They didn't come to the door. They stood on the sidewalk, just at the edge of the property line, like vampires waiting to be invited in. They stood in the rain, looking at the house. I watched them for 5 minutes. They looked small. They looked pathetic. And they looked furious. I stood up. I walked to the front door. I unlocked the deadbolt, then the handle. I stepped out onto the porch. I didn't invite them up. I stood by the railing, looking down at them. Haley, Martin called out. His voice was hoarse. Come talk to us. I am talking. I said. My voice was calm, amplified by the wet air. I am talking from here. We just want to understand, Colleen said, wiping rain from her face. Why are you doing this? We are your family. Because you don't respect me. I said, you don't respect my home. You don't respect my no. We were desperate, Lauren shouted. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a folded piece of paper. I had written it out while waiting for them. I have a compromise, I said. They looked up, hope flickering in their eyes. I am willing to give you a loan. I said, $5,000 for a deposit on a rental. Any rental you want. Colleen took a step forward. Oh, honey, thank you. I knew you would. Stop, I said, holding up a hand. It is a loan. It will be repaid, and in exchange, you will sign a document. A document prepared by my lawyer stating that you have no claim to this property, no right to occupancy, and that you will never attempt to use my address again. The hope vanished. Sign a document? Martin scoffed. You want a contract to help your sister? Yes, I said, and if you refuse, or if you come back here again uninvited, I will file for a restraining order. I have the footage from today. I have the police report. I will make it permanent. There was a silence. The rain pattered on the leaves of the oak tree. Then the outrage broke. Heartless, Colleen screamed. You are absolutely heartless. You want us to sign away our family bond for $5,000? I am asking you to sign away your entitlement, I yelled back, losing my cool for the first time. I am asking you to acknowledge that I exist. You put paperwork above blood. Lauren spat. Keep your money. I don't want your dirty money. We don't need anything from you, Martin said, his face twisting into a sneer. You made your choice. You chose the house. Suddenly, a blue light flashed against the wet pavement. A police cruiser turned the corner, slowly rolling toward us. Mrs. Kravitz had called them again. My parents froze. They looked at the police car, then at me. Officers stepped out. One of them recognized Martin from earlier in the day. Sir, the officer called out, we talked about this. You are disturbing the peace. You need to move along. Martin looked at me one last time. There was no love in his eyes. There was only the cold, hard look of a man who had lost a business deal. Let's go, he muttered to Colleen. They got in the car. They didn't look back. The officer nodded to me and watched them drive away. I went back inside and locked the door. I slid the deadbolt home. It clicked with a sound like a gunshot. 3 days later, I received an envelope in the mail. It had been forwarded from my old apartment address, the one I had moved out of 2 months ago. It was a thick, official-looking envelope from the county recorder's office. I opened it. Inside was a document titled, Claim of Equitable Interest. It was dated 3 weeks prior. It was a legal filing attempted by Martin and Colleen Price. In the filing, they asserted that they had contributed labor and consulting services toward the purchase of the property at 1402 Oak Street and therefore held a 20% equitable interest in the home. They had tried to put a lien on my house. They had tried to legally steal a piece of my home before they even moved in. But across the front of the document, in big red ink, was a stamp. Rejected. Insufficient evidence of agreement. They had failed. The county clerk had seen through it. I looked at the date. They had filed this the day after the first dinner. The day I told them no about the spare room. They hadn't just been pressuring me. They had been actively trying to undermine my ownership from day one. I felt a wave of nausea, followed by a cold, hard clarity. I took the document and walked to my filing cabinet, the one with the new lock. I opened the folder marked Family. I put the rejected claim inside, right next to the police report and the forged landlord letter. I closed the drawer and locked it. Months passed. The seasons changed. The leaves on the oak tree turned gold, then brown, then fell. I got the promotion. I became the senior project lead. The raise was significant. I bought new furniture for the spare room, a nice desk, a comfortable chair, and a bookshelf. I made it an office. I didn't put a bed in it. I didn't hear from them. Christmas came and went. I spent it with Dana and her family. They were loud and chaotic and kind. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody asked me for keys. One day in March, I was driving through the west side of town, a working-class neighborhood, modest but safe. I turned a corner and saw a familiar car in a driveway. It was a small, beige duplex. In the front yard, I saw Toby and Mia. They were wearing winter coats, running around a plastic slide. They looked bigger. They looked happy. Lauren was sitting on the front steps. She was looking at her phone. She looked tired, but she looked settled. I slowed down. Part of me wanted to honk. Part of me wanted to wave, but I didn't. I kept driving. I watched them in my rearview mirror until they were just specks of color against the gray siding. They had figured it out. They had survived without devouring me. I drove home to my bungalow. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden light on the yellow siding. My garden was starting to bloom. The daffodils I had planted in the fall were pushing up through the soil. I made a cup of tea and went out to the front porch. I sat in the rocking chair I had finally bought myself. I sat there for a long time, listening to the neighborhood sounds, a dog barking, a distant lawnmower, the wind in the trees. It was peaceful. It was mine. My phone buzzed on the small table next to me. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I stared at it. It could be a telemarketer. It could be a client. Or it could be them. Maybe Martin, calling from a payphone. Maybe Lauren, blocking her number to get through. I watched the phone vibrate. I watched the green button pulse. I didn't reach for it. I thought about the 79 missed calls. I thought about the forged letter. I thought about the police car in my driveway. But I also thought about the little kids playing in the yard. I thought about the silence of Christmas morning. I was safe, but I was scarred. I had my house, but I had lost my history. The phone stopped ringing. The screen went dark. I picked up my tea and took a sip. It was still warm. I looked out at the street, empty and quiet under the streetlights. I didn't block the number, but I didn't call back. I just sat there, in the home that had cost me everything and nothing, and let the future stay unresolved. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey into the difficult reality of setting boundaries with the people we are supposed to trust the most. I would love to know where you are listening from today. Please leave a comment down below with your country or city. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories. We explore the complex, emotional, and sometimes dark side of human relationships every week. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. Did Haley do the right thing? Was the price of her peace too high? Share your perspective in the comments in English. I read them all. Until next time.